Before we start with your preview today, make sure that you have your TCI 5 notes open. You can either have them side by side with the video, or you can jump back and forth between the two, whatever you would like to do. Make sure that if you don't understand something while this video is going, pause it, rewind it, and if none of those work, you can raise your hand and ask for help. So if we scroll down in our notes to the preview question, it asks you to write down what you think of when you hear the term economy or economics. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video, go to your notes, and just answer, what do you think that term means? After you've recorded your thoughts, let's look at how scientists define the term economics. Economics is using limited resources to satisfy unlimited wants. What does that mean? Well, there's three types of resources. First is natural. Natural resources are things like oil, gas, trees, something that naturally occurs on planet Earth. The second type of resource is a labor resource. This is the actual work people do, like this good-looking lumberjack. And lastly, we have capital resources. Capital resources are things we actually make, like an axe or some other type of tool. Now, all three of these, natural, labor, and capital resources, are scarce. We only have so many trees on our planet, we only have so many lumberjacks to cut them down, and we only have so many axes for the lumberjacks to use. So the difference between what we want and what we have available is always going to be uneven. If every single person in America wants a house of their own, we would run out of trees, we would run out of contractors, and we would run out of tools. So economics is deciding how to split up these resources to make as many people happy as we can. Now, the three basic questions of economics. First question is, what are we going to make? We must decide, are we going to make long sleeve t-shirts, short sleeve t-shirts, insulated t-shirts for cold places like Pinedale, or very thin, breathable t-shirts for tropical places? That is the first question. The second question is, how are we going to make these t-shirts? Are we going to have robots trained to make all of them in some kind of robot t-shirt factory? Or are we going to have old ladies sit down at their sewing machines and make every single t-shirt by hand? The last question is, once we've made our t-shirts, who gets them? Are they only for special people? Are they for whoever will bid the highest amount of money? Are they for the first person in line at the store? Do we have a system where people apply to get t-shirts and whoever's the neediest gets one? We've got to decide who are we going to give them to. Now, there's three basic types of economies in the world today. First is traditional. That is signified by the African man and his cattle. These are the oldest and also the rarest types of economies. Second type is a market economy. Hopefully this type of economy is familiar because that's what our country, the United States, uses. This is the most common form of economy. And lastly, we have the command economy. Now, the first one, traditional. Here's how they answer the three basic questions of what, how, and who gets these goods that are produced. So, when it comes to what they make, they have a simple answer: what we've always made. Going back thousands of years, this farmer in Africa has always raised the same breed of cattle on the same land. He doesn't come up with new inventions and try and make new things. He just always does what his people have done. The next question: how does he raise these cattle? Well, the same way they were raised 1,000 years ago. They graze the same fields, they dig the same wells for water, they take them up in the same pastures. Whatever has always been done, that's what they do. Lastly, who gets these cattle? Well, they stay in the village. His family eats them, or himself, and possibly some other people in his village. But he does not put them on a cattle truck and ship them to the big city to be slaughtered and sent to grocery stores. Next type of economy, a market economy. What does a market economy make? Well, whatever they can make money off of. If there can be money made off something, no matter how stupid it is, a market economy will make it. How do they decide how these goods are produced? Well, businesses compete against each other to make the best product and still make a profit. Because if they're not making money, this type of economy would not work. And lastly, who gets it? Well, whoever has the money to pay for it. Not everyone gets an iPad. Not only tall people or short people or young people or old people, but whoever has $800, you can go buy one. Now, the problem with a market economy is kind of obvious. There's going to be some very, very, very rich people and some very, very, very poor people. Not everyone is going to live in the same house, drive the same car, wear the same clothes, eat the same kind of food. That, unfortunately, is the downside of a market economy. Now, there were a couple guys a few years ago by the name of Marx and Engels over on the left, and they decided that a market economy wasn't fair. So they came up with this idea of socialism. And if you've learned about utopias or utopian societies, this is one form of utopia. They decided that everyone deserves exactly the same amount of everything. So they wrote some books and philosophized about these ideas until two guys came along in Russia in the 20th century and decided to make this type of economy work. So they started a new type of government/economy called communism. Now in communism, they tried to make sure everyone had the same thing. This obviously wouldn't work. Imagine the government today trying to keep track of every single tiny thing that's made, and then making sure every single one of the 300 million people in our country gets exactly the same amount. That would be a huge headache. So instead of everyone getting equal stuff, these two guys, Lenin and Stalin, and other communist leaders from other countries, just said, hey, we'll tell you what you get, when you get it, and how often you get it. Now, this type of economy is called a command economy. All three of these same questions of what, how, and who can be answered the same. The government decides everything. When it comes to what to be made in this country, the government decides what we're going to make and how many we're going to make of it. When it comes to how is this thing going to be made, again, the government decides exactly where and who will be making these products. And lastly, once the products are finished, the government decides who gets it, or the government sets the price. They don't go to the highest bidder. They don't go to only the rich people. It's whoever the government says can receive these goods. Now, if we took these ideas of a market economy way over here on the right, and a command economy way over here on the left, sort of like on a number line, most modern countries are not on the edge. Most of them are somewhere towards the middle. So if you think about Cuba, Cuba is one of the few communist governments left in the world today. But even they aren't purely a command economy because the government doesn't control everything. So over time, they've been moving towards the center, trying to find ways to be more free and open for their people. Now, the United States, on the other hand, is not a pure market economy because there's some things that our government still controls and decides who and how they are made. Some examples in our country would include things like prescription drugs. Not everyone can go to the pharmacy and buy as many prescription drugs as they want, whenever they want. The government controls those things. So when we're finished with our preview, what we're going to do is do a tour of the world again, but instead of looking at what type of government these countries have, we're going to look at what type of economy they have. And we'll be asking ourselves, where do they fall on this line? Are they an extreme command economy, somewhere towards the middle, or are they a totally free market economy?